got questions throughout, please feel free to post in there and the team will assist during the session, if not afterwards. Please pay special attention. We are going to have some exciting Q&A and prizes at the end of the session. So pay careful attention. You never know what exciting prizes you could get. So the team will assist with that. So we are very excited and we are really, really looking forward to what Stephen has to say to us. So a little bit about our presenter today. Stephen Lurie is very experienced in the automotive and motorcycle aftermarkets with over 30 years experience. He has held various commercial roles for the import, manufacturing and distribution of spare parts, accessories and services in the motorcycle and automotive aftermarket space. His responsibilities include sales, marketing of OME and OME approved parts and services to market not only in South Africa and Africa, but in several markets globally. Stephen is a passionate automotive junkie with a keen interest in all things cars and motorsports, and he has competed in various motorsport disciplines since the age of 5. That is very impressive, Steve. So he's currently the Revenue Acquisition Executive at PG Glass and Managing Director of Lamar Film South Africa. That is a very expansive bio, so we are looking forward to the information that you have to share with us. So with that, over to you, Stephen. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for that awesome intro, Adele. I didn't know so much about me. What I can tell you, though, is that I am a Shark supporter. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I do think you can see my screen. I just want to make sure before I continue.
Apologies, Stephen.
Just say again.
Cool. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So,
sorry, Stephen, your screen is not sharing at the moment. It was up and then it disappeared. Just reshare for us, please.
Okay. Let's have a look.
Perfect. Now we can see it. Thank you so much. Stephen, you're just on mute now. Stephen, your microphone is just muted.
Okay, sorry, the mute button was blocked on my side.
Perfect.
Okay, right. With a small technical glitch out the way, probably me and my age that's giving it away. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to our KZN for hosting this quite big event. And well done on being the first educational seminar that we're giving with this content. So without further ado, let's get going. So really what we're doing today is to give you an update of automotive trends that are impacting auto glass repair and replacement. And we're going to look at the impact of these trends on the insurance market and then just show you how important it is now to be asking more questions around fitment and fitment practices or replacement practices. So let's start with something exciting.
Hier kom ons karretjie wat self bestuur en nou wag ons. Hy het klaar sy flikkerliggie af. Kyk, hier kom hy af in die straat. Nou jokes. Waar gaan jy gesien? Ja. Hy stop vragtak. Hoe weet hy om af te kry? Stop hy op sy eie plek. En hier kry ek 'n notification wat sê luister jy het 5 minute om te kom inklim. So ek moet nou net onthou ek unlock hom nou van die app af. Daar's hy's ge-unlock. Hier klim ons in die karretjie. Daarso wys hy JD. Ons klim in. So I can sit actually. Kyk net nou. Hoe crazy is hierdie? So hierso sê hy vir my goeie naam. Hier begin die raai. Dis niemand by die stuurwiel nie. Dis niemand nie. Kom ons ry julle. About 1 minute. Okay. Dit ons sit like gordels aansluiting gaan 'n geweldige ongeluk maak. Jy kan dit nie glo nie.
Okay, so a large portion of what is driving ADAS technology into vehicles, and ADAS stands for Advanced Driving Assistance System. So it's the last three letters, driving assistance system, that are quite relevant when we talk about this. The Society of Automotive Engineers, which is a US-based organization, but an international organization for automotive engineers across the world, formulated this table or this matrix of automation and defining levels of automation in order to work with regulatory bodies around the world to understand the levels of automation and have people focused at any areas. To give you some idea, in Germany, and I'm going to explain each of these, but in Germany, level 3 is already regulated. In other words, manufacturers with cars that can do level 3 automation are allowed to be used on German roads. By contrast, in South Africa, we have zero regulation today. So in effect, we are at level 0 in terms of our regulation, meaning that there is no defined framework within which to ascertain when driver assistance systems are on a vehicle, who is in charge and what that means. So to put that more into perspective, according to the South African road traffic regulation, the driver is always in control of the vehicle. No matter what driver assistance systems are on the vehicle, the driver is to always be in control of the vehicle. So I think we can understand that if we have certain systems on these vehicles, that our regulation is quite far behind Europe and the US and countries like Germany. And therefore, any adherence to these regulations or maintenance of these systems becomes entirely voluntary. And that has its own set of unique circumstances. To describe these levels of automation, at level 0, there's no automation. So absolutely nothing. So think city golf. You had no assistance, not even power steering. At level 1, we would call this single driver assistance support. So something, at least one thing on the vehicle. So power steering would be a good example of driver assistance. And there are several others. ABS brakes is another example. And then at level 2, we talk about partial automation or simultaneous ADAS support. So that could be where you have parking assistance, so beeping at you while you are, when you're leaving a parking so that you don't crash into anything. And maybe that the beeping gets louder or warns you, or that's a form of partial automation, and combined with power steering, you've now got two things happening together that help you get into and out of parking easily and not have an accident. The biggest thing we're going to talk about today is a new section that was inserted a couple of years ago called Level 2+. And Level 2+ is when you have a system of automation that includes front-facing cameras on vehicles. And those front-facing cameras assist with technology like lane keeping assist, which we'll see later, and lane deviation warning, and automated emergency braking. Now, their general consensus is that the market and all OEMs are focused on Level 2+. Level 3 has got very little penetration. In fact, less than 1% of OEMs are focusing on Level 3 right now. And it is believed that Level 4 and 5 are many, many, many years off. Although that video that we just looked at showed that cars are being tested in California with that automation, and Tesla has launched a robotaxi. mainstream OEM acceptance of fully automated vehicles is a long, long, long way off, and so is regulation globally on it. This video gives you a little bit of a description of what all these assistance systems are on vehicles. So this is called sometimes cross-traffic monitor or reverse assistance warning. And this is to warn you if a car is coming and you might be reversing into oncoming traffic. City brake system or automated emergency braking. If the driver is not really paying attention, the system will intervene and apply the brakes for the driver. Traffic signal recognition or traffic sign recognition is where the front-facing camera will be able to recognize speed limits and then be able to warn the driver if they are exceeding speed limits. Forward collision warning is if a driver on the highway or at higher speeds is not paying attention. It will warn the driver that they are about to have an accident. Lane departure warning is if you are changing lanes without your indicator on, the system will warn you. It could be that you may not be concentrating or you're drifting across lanes, so it'll provide a warning. In some cases and on some vehicles, it will even steer you back into the lane. And then blind spot information is if there's a car in your blind spots, it's to stop you pulling out into that vehicle. High beam support is turning your high beam headlights on and off automatically, which is safety for other drivers, so you're not blinding them. And that's the summary of most of the systems we're going to be referring to today. I often get asked the question, but why are all these systems on vehicles? So a large portion of the reason for putting these systems onto vehicles is safety regulations across the world. All of us will have heard of Euro NCAP. It is the standard by which safety systems are measured, and a lot of cars have been in the news, particularly in South Africa recently, for their NCAP ratings. Since the beginning of 2024, you cannot get a 5-star NCAP rating or safety rating on the vehicle if the vehicle does not have a front-facing camera and at least automated emergency braking or forward collision warning systems. So regulation is really driving the adoption of these systems on vehicles. And the other thing which we'll see just now is differentiation as well. The beauty about these systems is that in markets that are more mature with these systems, there are reports and studies that have shown that it can be up to 50% less accidents, front-to-back accidents, as a result of forward collision warning. So that's good news for insurers. So regulators have been driving the adoption for safety. The only thing is that the regulators at this point have not defined the ongoing monitoring and maintenance of these systems. So there is currently a paper from TRL and TÜV Rheinland in Germany around European regulation that says, how does one consider the lifetime performance of these systems? It's all well and fine that a new car must be sold with them, but how do you maintain these systems? And so regulation is now starting to come in globally around the maintenance of these systems. In our world, these systems lead to something that's called sensor fusion, and we're going to explain that as we go, but it also means that these systems have to be recalibrated. And generally speaking, what happens is an OEM, well, not even generally, OEMs define that these systems need to be recalibrated after any event that the vehicle experiences. And the reason is that these cameras that are mounted predominantly on the front windscreen, but in some cases they can be mounted at the back, etc. But today we're going to be focused mostly on what's mounted on the windscreen, is that these cameras see colors. They are particularly focused. So it's always difficult to describe this phenomenon over Zoom, but if you think about satellite dish, or if you think about pointing a laser pointer at something far away, if that laser pointer is just 1 millimeter out movement in your hand, it could be as much as 20 meters out, depending how far it is. And that's why cameras, although they remain the sensor of choice by OEMs, after any event, and I'll describe events now, these cameras need to be recalibrated to make sure that they're still looking in the same direction, because the vehicle and the vehicle systems do not know after an event if these cameras have been calibrated correctly. An event could be a windscreen replacement. I mean, that's obviously the angle we come from. An event could be an accident. An event could be the replacement of a front bumper. An event could be something like changing the wheels on the car from 19-inch to 20-inch wheels. It could be changing from on-road tires to off-road tires because the family wants to go and do an off-road trip in a Land Rover. Those are all defined by an OEM as events. What we are seeing with front-facing cameras is, because the camera has been chosen by the OEMs as the most important component in these systems, that penetration across the world is now growing quite rapidly. And South Africa is not that far behind the world. I am terribly sorry that I haven't put 2025 in here yet, but I can tell you that there was even further growth in 2025. We are expecting to be well in excess of 15% penetration of the total car population in South Africa will have a front-facing camera by the end of this year. And South Africa is less than 2% of the global car market. So we need to understand that bespoke vehicles for South Africa are not that easy to attain. So vehicles for right-hand drive markets like the UK, New Zealand, Australia, etc., we tend to be an absorber of the specifications that those car parks absorb, because those car parks tend to be bigger than ours. Is this equipment only on high-end cars? Funnily enough, if we look at the two things we're going to be looking at today, a front-facing camera and a head-up display, on these very expensive vehicles, many of them exceeding 2 million, a head-up display is optional. Lane departure warning is either standard or optional lane keeping assist, and standard. Now, these things would be standard because they're driven by European regulation. But let's look at cars within the sweet spot. The 450 to 600,000 Rand range, which is where most cars in South Africa are today. As you can see, head-up display standard on at least one of them, but the lane keeping assist and lane departure warning standard on all these vehicles. What's driving this? Large portion of differentiator. All of us will know in our model mix recently that the Chinese cars and now Indian cars are having an absolute impact on our model mix and the type of vehicles we have on cover. And from as low as 400,000 Rand, things like automated emergency braking, lane departure warning, which absolutely requires a front-facing camera, blind spot monitoring, which requires cameras in the rearview mirrors, and rear cross traffic alerts, which requires either a monitoring or perhaps a camera in the back of the vehicle, but these are on entry-level vehicles. And then what does South Africans love? We love bakkies, and we see that the fastest selling bakkies in this country now have all of these systems standard. So what we're seeing today is anywhere between 60 to 70% of the vehicles that are being sold new in South Africa today have a front-facing camera, and that will continue to grow. And so what that means is within the next 2 to 3 years, we should be seeing a 50% growth annually in the penetration in the car park of vehicles with a front-facing camera. This is not a front-facing camera on this particular vehicle, but this is just to show that an entry-level vehicle like a Suzuki Swift has got a radar sensor. The radar sensor also does need to be recalibrated after an event, and this is used in the Suzuki for automated emergency braking. Okay, now we're going to talk about sensor fusion. Sensor fusion is when the camera, along with the radar that I just showed you, and other systems in the vehicle all work together to achieve the desired driver assistance safety system. So this little video just shows you at a high level how all these things work together, and then I'm going to show you a practical example. So here's a practical example. All of us will know from windscreen claims for many years that there are rain sensors on most windscreens these days. But here is an example of the good old rain sensor that was just there to check light refraction and then turn the windscreen wipers on or off, is now turned and become part of the circuit of all these sensors talking to each other in a car. And this is BMW's latest technology.
All new BMW models feature an advanced braking system that includes many technologies that drastically improve active safety. With brake drying, when the windshield wiper rain sensor detects moisture on the windshield, the brake pads intermittently move close to the rotors to eliminate any moisture between the two surfaces. The result is dry brakes and superior stopping performance on wet days.
And so on most BMWs now, you actually have to do a reset of the rain sensor or a recalibration of the rain sensor when replacing a BMW windscreen, because these systems all need to know that they're tightly calibrated. You can imagine if you're getting false readings from the moisture sensor, it'll be applying the brakes unnecessarily, which could lead to overheating in dry weather or even premature wearing of the brake pads. Why do we have sensor fusion? It's quite simply because on the vehicles, certain things do better at seeing or determining objects than other things. So LiDAR is really good at understanding the shape of objects. Cameras are really good at seeing objects. Radar is very good at measuring the distance between objects, for example. So in this next slide, we can see a good example in the top left picture where it says number 1, more sensor fusion. Here you have a pedestrian crossing the road. In the bumper is the radar measuring the distance to the pedestrian. At the top in the windscreen is the camera having a look at this pedestrian, and through the use of AI, determining that this is a pedestrian, a human being. And now the car is also determining, is the driver paying attention? What is the speed that we are approaching this pedestrian at? And do I need, as the car, to make a decision to emergency apply the brakes in case the driver might not be concentrating, or maybe the driver's reaction is not fast enough to avoid us knocking over this pedestrian? So that is a really good example of where sensor fusion gets used. Sensor fusion has allowed more advanced camera technology. The bottom left, that's a Subaru eyesight system that has an AR camera, an ordinary camera, and another camera specifically to see object shape. And these 3 cameras all work together. The more complex the systems, the more complex a recalibration has to be. And so the environments that are being required more and more by OEMs in order to do recalibrations of these systems is becoming more and more onerous. And other systems we can see are being tested, like what you saw, those big things on top of that Waymo car right in the beginning of the presentation. These systems will eventually be made smaller, much like our cell phones have, and be incorporated into the car. And all of these systems will require some form of recalibration. Now, here is an example of when calibration is not done correctly. So in 2019, in conjunction with MERA, which is a independent automotive research facility in the UK, and MERA in conjunction with the Transport Research Laboratory, which is in a way like the automotive section of CSIR in South Africa. They did testing on vehicles with ADAS systems and what happens if the vehicle was incorrectly recalibrated, which we see on the right. And you can see the vehicle doesn't see the object, which could be a car, crashes into it. If we look at the left-hand side, here this vehicle correctly calibrated avoids an accident with the object. So everyone's probably sitting there now going, wow, now I understand why our MBR costs are shooting through the roof. Stephen's probably about to tell us that there's going to be rising glass costs. And the bad news is, yes, unfortunately, this is leading to rising automotive glass costs. However, there are a multitude of studies across the world that have shown that, particularly within the insurance industry, there are benefits. There is an initial increase in costs, particularly most of these studies will show in third-party claims. But over time, as markets mature with these and a larger portion of the car park gets these technologies, insurers actually start to see a reduction in claim severity. So LexisNexis did a study on the true impact of ADAS features on insurance claim severity. What they found, and we have this study available to anybody that wants it. You can reach out to any one of the PG Glass people that are in this webinar today, and we will give you copies of these studies should you want them. The LexisNexis white paper basically showed that recalibration and repairs of ADAS components are necessary. Unfortunately, they can be costly, but ADAS components actually significantly reduce claim frequency. There is a minimal change in claim severity due to recalibration and repairs. So in other words, if the driver turns these systems off or doesn't adhere to the warnings from the systems, and the driver ignores everything the system is telling them, the driver will still have the same accident, and the accident will be of the same severity. But drivers that allow these systems to assist them actually have less accidents. So across a broad book that an insurer may have, these ADAS components do reduce claim frequency. What the LexisNexis study found was that overall ADAS-equipped vehicles lead to a net positive impact on loss costs. So there is good news for the insurers. This was so profound that Allianz, I'm sure you all know Allianz, one of the biggest insurers in Europe, actually started lobbying governments across Europe and other markets in which Allianz operates to make these systems mandatory on vehicles. Because Allianz's own study also showed, depending on maturity and penetration in a market, these systems will reduce rear-end collisions by between 10 to 50%. Vehicles with advanced emergency braking have a 70% lower probability of rear-end collisions. So Allianz actually supports mandatory automated emergency braking systems in new vehicles. And they were a big lobbyist across Europe for NCAP to make this compulsory to get 5 stars. But let's look at these systems and recalibration. I've spoken about these words, and a lot of them you're probably going, what is Stephen on about? So recalibration is just that. Once the vehicle has experienced an event, the systems need to be told where ground zero is again, where point zero is again. But there are a few things. It's not just about being able to recalibrate, or having a piece of equipment that can recalibrate. Firstly, anybody that does recalibrations need to identify which vehicles need recalibration. It's pointless trying to recalibrate a vehicle that doesn't need recalibration, and that would not be right. That's unethical. Secondly, it's hugely important to actually recalibrate a vehicle that requires recalibration. And that means accurate record keeping, that when a recalibration is done, that there are records of that recalibration having been done and a proof of recalibration. So the accepted proof of recalibration is that at the end of a recalibration, the entity doing the recalibration issues a certificate to say, and in our world, for example, if the client had a windscreen replaced at PG Glass, we did the recalibration on the 26th of August at 10 a.m. Here is your certificate that the vehicle was recalibrated. This picture in the middle shows you some of the things we've seen across the world. This is definitely not professional recalibration equipment. So that's the second thing that's required, is quality and capabilities, accredited processes, the right workshop conditions, the right tools and equipment, the right training, the correct ethics and the correct behavior across the supplier landscape. And in a world like ours, a multi-brand solution. So if you were to go and see any MBRs that you might have relationships with, you'll find that an OEM approved MBR will have like 10 pieces of equipment to do recalibration. If they're recalibrating a Merc, they need to have the Merc recalibration equipment. If it's a BMW, they need to have a BMW recalibration equipment. In a world of glass replacement, we are seeing multiple brands of cars every single day, and therefore we require within this environment a multi-brand solution. Something that in our world has been provided to us by Bosch, who is actually OE on most of, the original equipment supplier to most of the vehicle manufacturers. And then the third very important thing is future-proofing. These technologies have grown exponentially in the last 10 years, and they continue to develop. You saw from that opening video, that car already has technology in it that the cars that we have on the South African roads today don't. But whoever is investing in this requires future-proofing and having the knowledge, the expertise, and the people that are constantly monitoring market trends and the new technologies coming, so that any vehicle repair that is done ensures that these safety systems are restored. We've seen a massive influx in PG Glass of recalibration. By the end of 2024, we had done nearly 10 times the recalibrations that we did in 2018. Just to give you some example of how this has grown exponentially across the world. At PG, we're a franchisee of Belron Group, and Belron is the largest windscreen replacement company in the world. In 2025, Belron did over 17 million automotive glass jobs globally. In 2017, Belron did their first recalibration after a windscreen replacement. They did one in 2017. Last year, globally, across all Belron countries, over 5 million recalibrations were done. So this technology is coming at us. It's coming at us fast. If you just work out 16, 17 million jobs, 5 million calibrations, across the world, we're already seeing 30% penetration out of glass jobs. The other thing that's coming at us in terms of sensor fusion is technology that we're starting to see when we talk about future-proofing, technology that's arrived, and this is another little video included for fun. But this is very important because it segues into the next thing we're going to see.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Tom from Mazda Gurus, and today I have roped in our lovely guru, Sally. Hi, Sally. To demonstrate the driver facial recognition feature here for the optimum steering wheel, driver seat, and wing mirror position on the new CX-60. So, Sally, would you like to demonstrate how we get into it to begin with? We first of all go into our car settings, and we go all the way down into driver personalization. Now, what we have done is we've moved Sally's seat all the way back and all the way down as far as possible. Sally's going to add herself in as a new driver. So just click OK on that, Sally. So we have to work out how tall or short Sally is, which we worked out is 162 centimeters. As soon as Sally hits start, the system, hold on, Sally, let me zoom out. The system has told her to take off her glasses and caps and things like that so that the camera, Sally, where's the camera again?
Just that.
Up in the corner so it can see her face. As soon as Sally clicks start, everything should move. Taking its time. So the seat's gone forward, it's gone up. The steering wheel has now adjusted.
Lovely.
Sally, how do you feel? Perfect driving position, yeah? Fantastic. There is a secondary feature to this. So if you click OK on that, Sally, to save it, it will then ask Sally to look into the left and the right wing mirrors, and it should then set those for her. So she's looked left and she's looked right. Do it again, Sally. There we go, it's worked. That has now set her wing mirrors for us.
So, I mean, that's quite scary, but it leads into the shift to software-defined vehicles. And that's the next thing we have to talk about, is that ordinary technicians no longer are just focusing on mechanical stuff. Technicians now have to be software experts. And so we say a new type of OEM is emerging. They're actually tech companies, they're not car companies. So the old school environment was combustion engine with 70 electronic control units using proprietary and distributed hardware. The future is actually more electric with intelligent and centralized software functionality that's actually connected to the cloud. Anybody here with a newish car will know that you get automatic updates over the air. Your car suddenly has new software, much like your phone upgrades itself. That happens. And yes, guys, you are seeing correctly, Sony is planning to release a car. These are the guys that make PlayStation. They're now planning to release a car, because we have this blended model of between what is tech and what is cars going forward. And to explain this even more, we talk about, like, the Boeing Dreamliner, the most advanced passenger aircraft in the world, has 7 million lines of code that help this airliner and its pilots to fly, in most cases, autonomously. In a modern car, like this Volvo EX30, which we do have in South Africa, there's 100 million lines of code in this connected car. And that's because planes have outside sources. They will fly at a particular level. There are radars watching and all of that type of thing. So it's quite defined. But cars can do silly things. Other drivers on roads do silly things. So you can just imagine the power of a software in a vehicle with all these automated systems for safety. But what happens with software-defined vehicles is it creates new business models. One of the business models is usage-based insurance. So I go back to Sally. Every time Sally climbs into her Mazda, the Mazda knows it's Sally driving, because it does driver recognition, and you can't fool it. And for every minute that Sally drives, the car will log that. And if Sally gives permission to her insurance company and Mazda to use that data, you've got built-in usage-based insurance of every drive Sally does, every time Sally's been driving the car tired, every time she's on her phone. So it opens up a whole new world for subscription-based, usage-based insurance from these things. And motor manufacturers are lapping this up and deriving and putting paywalls in and making people pay to access that data. There is a lot of stuff going on around whether that is ethical or not, but that's it. But the other one is it'll lead to less accidents. When two cars are talking to each other and an accident has happened around the corner, the one car can tell the other car, listen, you're coming around a blind corner, I'm here, I'm stuck, I've just had an accident. But these things require secure gateways to avoid cars being hacked, and that limits access to data for repairers, and that makes it more complex to repair vehicles. The electrification of the car park, I'm not going to spend too much time. In future educational sessions, we'll talk more about EVs, but just know EVs are more expensive to repair, and there isn't a finite number. It's anywhere. Thatcham in the UK, who does a lot of work for the UK Insurance Institute, they just have found that battery electric vehicles broadly cost more to repair than their ICE equivalent, but as yet there isn't a defined standard. Is it 10% more, 50% more, 100% more? But they are more expensive to fix. Also, battery electric vehicles definitely have wireless diagnostics, and wireless diagnostics bring this whole new world. I'm not going to dwell on this in EV portfolios. The other thing that we're starting to see is a lot more head-up display. So this is a new head-up display system with augmented reality. Earlier, you would have seen that I spoke about the augmented reality on that Subaru camera system. Augmented reality is actually being able to use now navigation. Instead of you having to keep saying, is it the next intersection? Is it this intersection? In 100 meters, turn right. Projected onto the windscreen is actually the path that you need to follow. And you'll see the system at night will actually produce the lanes for you, so you can check that you're driving in the lanes. And you'll see later on, it'll even identify if there's a hazard on the side of the road that the driver needs to be aware of. This type of a system requires a very different type of windscreen that uses a very different type of interlayer that can work with the projector. And so this is another thing coming at us. So what we also see is AR front calibration, front camera recalibration, because obviously these type of systems need to be projecting the correct intersection that you're turning left into. It can be nothing worse than if it's not recalibrated and it tells you to turn left up a one-way. So there's a practical example of this. So vehicle complexity and glass complexity is growing. In 1980, this Citroen DS had the most options you could get on any windscreen at the time. And that was, would you like the windscreen clear or shaded? That was it. Today, we see up to 28 different features on a windscreen, some very large panoramic roofs. We have seen this massive growth in the amount of rain sensors. So around 80% of all cars sold now will have a rain sensor. 70% have encapsulation, and that's for road noise, wind noise, waterproofing. We have seen a reduction in solar. That has actually come down from 40% to around 27%. But heat absorbing PVB, so the interlayer has gone up to replace the solar control properties on glass. As we've been speaking all day, we're seeing 56% of glass now with ADAS brackets, 17% heated, and up to 7% now with the head-up displays I just spoke about. So how does this work out? Because everyone's going, okay, there's a cost. So we've done a study on vehicles with and without these systems in each price bracket. So what we found, very few vehicles under 200,000 Rand. In fact, none of them have an ADAS system. But we start to see vehicles with ADAS-equipped technology entering from the 200 to 300,000 Rand mark, and up to 700,000 Rand, which is the sweet spot in the market where most cars are being sold today. You can see that non-ADAS windscreens are in the region of 3,500 to 4,000 Rand, whereas an ADAS-equipped windscreen and replacement of that, including your ADAS recalibration, can be as much as 9,000 Rand. So this thinking about saying, well, we'll take the car value, apportion a percentage of that for our glass loss, expected glass loss costs, no longer can hold true. You actually need to be very aware, and I go all the way back to identifying the vehicles that have this technology early on. So understanding that the underwriting decisions made around these vehicles need to be different. Because although the ADAS technology will prevent costs in the long run around accidents, unfortunately, these vehicles are still driving on the same roads and are still as prone to windscreen damage as any other vehicle. And never more before now, having seen that, is it important to encourage your policyholders to repair chips. We always have talked about repair before replace. It's our mantra. And I'm not trying to push a particular product here, just saying, just check, make sure that when selecting service providers that they do offer repairs, the repairs are of a good quality, because never before has it been more important to talk a policyholder out of a replacement if that windscreen can be repaired rather than replaced. when we talk about this, there are several factors to be aware of around when to repair versus replacing. There are certain things that we can't do anything about. The environment and the market, weather, temperature, road conditions, those will cause glass damage. There's no control that we have there. Technology and vehicle mix, which I've spoken to about most of today, we don't have control there. That's coming at us whether we like it or not. The vehicle manufacturers will be able to drive that. But consumer behavior is something that we collectively can drive. We can warn consumers to be vigilant around damage on their glass, to get it repaired as soon as possible when a chip happens on that glass. You can look at, within the insurance environment, the policy coverage and claim structures to encourage repair before replace. You can look at, we say, joint marketing, running chip repair campaigns and things like that. We call the people that drive around with a chip do-nothings. We've got to convert those people into do-somethings. We have to change their propensity to have the glass repaired. And obviously, provider behavior. We're a provider. If we don't buy into making sure that we only replace when necessary and repair every other time, then you don't, that type of provider doesn't enable chip repair. So everything on the right, this right block, is all within our collective control as a community around reducing glass costs. The other thing is, a repair is greener than a replacement. A repair is up to 70% less carbon emissions than a replacement. So repairs save over 2/3 of the carbon footprint used for a replacement. So in summary, the road to autonomy will continue, but everybody is developing at level 2+, which is all the technologies you saw today. ADAS cameras will continue to grow. We can't stop that. It's driven by legislation and NCAP. Sensor fusion will make recalibrations more complex. Head-up displays are coming at us and will require recalibration. Vehicles are software-driven, meaning that technicians have to know more. Like in our world, we see it. Our technicians are now plugging computers into vehicles to do a windscreen replacement, to understand exactly what electronics are on that windscreen and what's affected during a replacement. EV penetration will continue to grow, and that brings some complexity. These new Chinese cars on the vehicle, they are rising. They are impacting our model mix, and they come standard with all of these technologies because it's a differentiator for them. And that means glass complexity grows. We, as a service provider, we want to ensure all clients are safe. They cannot leave our facilities and should not leave any service provider's facilities without being restored, with all those safety systems restored. And repair. It's like never a better time to talk about repairing. And that's it. I'll take questions. Whilst everyone might be flabbergasted at everything you just heard in the last 50 minutes.
Stephen, there are some questions in the Q&A that we can maybe raise.
Okay, let's have a look. I see this in recent information. It's facial imaging and recording of when you're on your cell phone. Yes, I can tell you that my car warns me when I'm on my phone and tells me to start paying attention. That technology is coming. The question I spoke about earlier was, with that technology, there becomes a big question about who owns that data. Because the OEM has that data, but the driver owns the car and they own that data. And you, as the owner of the vehicle, should be able to tell the vehicle manufacturer whether or not to use that data. But more interestingly, if you believe it can save you because you never use your phone, you should be able to approach your insurer and say, monitor my driving. So the key thing about that is it's there. But regulation and apprehension still hasn't decided what to do with that data. Windscreens in construction, plant and equipment is the technology now included. In plant and equipment, we are not seeing a huge advent of it yet, although driver monitoring systems are in plant and equipment. What I can tell you is that it's almost impossible to buy a truck now without these systems installed. And many trucks also have these systems as rear-facing. So it is coming at us in the commercial environment. It will probably come in plant and equipment at some point. In a scenario where the driver reacts correctly to an advanced driver assistance warning, but a collision still occurs, how is liability split between the driver, insurer, and the vehicle manufacturer? So that's a very interesting question. And I can only talk about the studies that we've done. Our own legal framework studies have shown that there is a very clear no gray area, that if a recalibration is not done, that the supply chain that resulted in that replacement without a recalibration, that supply chain will be liable for anything that occurs, or if there is a claim. When you combine that, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but when you combine that with some of the consumer protection laws that are in South Africa, as well as common law, it starts to be borne out that actually the supplier that replaced that windscreen is the most liable, so to speak. But in an event in insurance where the insurer was paying, and the insurer may or may not have insisted that the supplier does the recalibration, then you start to have joint liability. And so it's very important, and it's why we do these things, and it's why it's educational now, that the insurers don't see this as an optional extra. This is absolutely required. And the example that we use is airbags in this country are still not regulated, and they've been around in vehicles for 40 years. But if a vehicle has an accident, we don't have a choice to say we're not replacing that airbag. You replace that airbag, because in the next accident, if there's no airbag, there's a liability issue there that is plain to see. This technology is invisible, but it has just the same effect as an airbag. So I hope that answers that question. If chips are detected when taking your vehicle for service, for example, what is better, getting insurer to repair or the dealership repairing? In most cases, dealerships don't have repair technology. They will subcontract to a professional repairer. The only advice I can give is the question should always be, because it's your client, and we all have a responsibility when it's our client to do what's in the best interests of the client, is that if your client is asking you, and you dealing with a dealer, or even your client is asking the dealer, who's doing the chip repair? Is it guaranteed? What is being, what materials are being used to complete the chip repair, and is it a safe chip repair done by a certified person who has a certificate and has been trained competently to do chip repairs? Brokers face the brunt of client frustration when vehicles sit for specialized glass. Are you currently experiencing? Yes, definitely. There are a few issues around ADAS in the supply chain. Firstly, we have this brunt of new models that has come into South Africa, and the aftermarket cannot keep up with having generic glass available for these vehicles. So that's your first issue, is just the number of new models being launched in the country. The next complexity you have is it's much more expensive to ship this glass around the world. So in the old days, without all these brackets and things on the glass, you could pack 20 into a standard glass pallet. You could get 20 windscreens. Today, you're lucky to get 8 or 9 windscreens. And so logistics chain means shipping more expensively, having to ship in bigger containers, which means more shipments, which adds more complexity. And so this entire supply chain has got a lot more complex. So that is unfortunate reality with this. And we face every day increasing customer frustration, because try as we might, we struggle to get the glass with a lot of vehicles. Even with a chip repair, do you need to take the vehicle in for calibration? No, that is the beauty of a chip repair, is that nothing has changed. That is not an event that has caused the glass to move or caused the angle of incidence on anything on the vehicle to move, and therefore not necessary. The only thing I caution there is some chip repairs can't be done in front of the camera, because the camera then is not seeing what there is. So the areas to repair are slightly less when you have a front-facing camera. How many PG outlets are certificate and capable of doing recalibration?
Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, Steve. We do have 3 questions that we need to ask the team. We are running out of time. So I have popped our email addresses into the chat for any questions that we don't get to. Please feel free to reach out. Steve has got 3 questions that we're going to ask you guys, and fastest fingers first will determine who wins the prize.
Okay, first question. Is a recalibration required after a windscreen replacement on ADAS equipped vehicles is done?
Oh! Wow. Okay, the first person who came back to us was, I think this is Francois Vessels. Francois Vessels, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Has the emergence of Chinese brands brought ADAS recalibration more into the spotlight?
Oh, Lord, guys. Okay, stop.
I'm just glad the answers are mostly correct, like 99% correct.
Let's just see who was first. Now I don't know where we finished and where we ended. Okay, there we go.
Well, you can check at the end if you need to.
I think that was Louis van Staden.
You can do an audit if you like later, Cans.
Okay.
And then 3, what is the most effective way to reduce overall cost on auto glass, considering the increasing costs new technology is driving on glass?
Well done, guys.
Ooh.
Repair before replace.
Okay. To our colleagues, do you want me to take more questions if we have time, or should we respond to the questions? We can respond to these questions via email or via a follow-up notification.
Yes, Steve, we've come to the end of the session.
Cool.
So we will do via email.
Okay, cool.
With that, we just wanted to thank you. That was really insightful. You've definitely got my respect. You guys are working in such an interesting industry and it's always changing. I'd hired one of those really fancy Chinese cars not long ago and took it to the Michalisburg and it couldn't recognize potholes. So it can see above, but not below. That car was absolutely freaking out and I hope they recalibrated it because I did hit those potholes. But thank you so much, everyone. And I want to thank the IIKZN for this today, and a special thanks to the education team at IIKZN. We know how much work goes into the background with this. Your CPD certificates will be shared with you as well as available on the AC Develop website with portals there. The recording of this session will be available there to view. Unfortunately, not to download, but you can go into the archives and view it. The PG Glass team will be available to assist with all the further comments. Thank you so much for the engagements. That's how you know it's been really interesting and impactful, is when we get the comments section a buzz. So thank you so much. If I can just ask Candice, please share your details again, because I think we might have lost it in between
I've just popped it on again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So huge thank you to everyone. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, guys. Have a lovely, lovely weekend.